Have you ever wondered what stories ancient Egypt still whispers through its artifacts? Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, where we uncover the mysteries of the past. On this channel, we bring history to life with calm, immersive storytelling. Please subscribe, like, and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there. Then let's begin. The Narmer Palette, the birth of a kingdom. Beneath the pale desert sun of early dynastic Egypt, where the Nile wound its long silver ribbon through a land still half formed by myth, an artist once stood before a slab of greenish-gray siltstone. His hands were steady, his task monumental. He did not know that what he carved that day, a pair of kings, one wearing the white crown, one the red, would survive 5,000 years, that it would whisper across time as the very beginning of Egypt's story. This was the Narmer Palette, a ceremonial object, yes, but more than that, a message, a declaration, a symbol of the moment. A land divided became one. When archaeologists uncovered it in 1898 among the ruins of Hierakonpolis, the ancient city of the falcon god Horus, they could scarcely believe what they were seeing. The stone was heavy, nearly 2 feet tall, its surface covered with carefully carved images, every line purposeful, every figure alive with movement and meaning. It was not a tool of everyday life. It was a record, the world's first political statement rendered in stone. If you were to stand before it now, inside the Cairo Museum, and let your eyes follow the story etched into its surface, you might begin to feel that soft pull, the same one that seems to echo in all things ancient Egyptian. The feeling that the figures carved there are not frozen, but waiting, that the king, his attendants, his enemies, are simply holding still until the ritual begins again. The palette shows Narmer, a name known now as the first pharaoh, though in his time, that word did not yet exist. He stands tall, almost impossibly so, his body shaped by the artistic conventions that would define Egyptian art for millennia, his head and legs shown in profile, but his torso twisted forward, his gaze steady, his arm raised high, about to strike a kneeling captive. This image, repeated countless times through history, begins here, on this stone. Behind him stands a servant, holding the king's sandals. Before him, the enemy. The composition is not random violence, it is ritual, order triumphing over chaos, the central truth of Egyptian belief. On the reverse side, Narmer wears the red crown of Lower Egypt, surveying rows of decapitated foes. Standard-bearers march, and before the king are 2 entwined beasts, long-necked felines curving around a circular depression at the palette's center. The circle may have been meant to hold cosmetics, but its placement is symbolic. The union of north and south, of 2 halves entwined in eternal balance. To the ancient eye, every symbol here sang with layered meaning. The falcon, Horus, perches above defeated enemies, representing divine favor. The hieroglyphs beside Narmer's head spell out his name, a catfish and a chisel. Narmer, the first name of a line that would rule for 3,000 years. Imagine the day this object was used, perhaps in a temple courtyard, before priests in white linen robes, the scent of incense thick in the morning air, the murmur of prayers as the palette was presented before an image of Horus, or perhaps even before the living king himself. This was not art to be looked at, it was art to be performed. The unification of Egypt was not simply an event, it was a ceremony, and this palette was its centerpiece. When the craftsmen carved it, Egypt was a land of villages scattered along the Nile's fertile banks, small city-states ruled by local chieftains, but trade, rivalry, and shared ritual had begun to weave them together. Narmer, perhaps following Scorpion King before him, brought the pieces into one. Upper and Lower Egypt joined beneath a single crown. The palette captures that moment, the transition from myth to monarchy, from scattered tribes to a kingdom. In this way, it is not just an artifact of Egypt's past, it is the moment Egypt began. You might wonder why such an early ruler would need a palette at all. After all, its traditional purpose, grinding pigment, was purely cosmetic. But by this time, palettes had become ritualized, symbolic objects. They represented preparation, not for adornment, but for divine offering. The circular depression at the center would have once held sacred pigment, perhaps malachite green for rebirth, or ochre for vitality. The act of mixing the colors while gazing upon the unifying king may have symbolized the renewal of the world itself. Consider too the material, siltstone, smooth and cool, quarried from the deserts of the Nile Valley, chosen not just for beauty, but for permanence. It was meant to last, and it has. Each figure on the palette moves with a strange energy. The fallen enemies, their bodies twisted in ritualized pose, the standard-bearers walking in solemn rhythm, even the gods themselves, watching. To the modern eye, these are frozen images, but to the ancient one, they were alive, each line a spell, each shape a prayer. When scholars first examined the Narmer Palette, they saw political propaganda, a victory monument. But over time, another reading emerged. It was not just about conquest, it was about harmony. The unification of Upper and Lower Egypt was more than a political event. It was the rebalancing of the cosmos. The desert and the floodplain, the lotus and the papyrus, male and female, sun and river. To unify them was to ensure that creation itself remained whole. Look closely at the king's crown. On one side, the tall white headget of Upper Egypt. On the other, the red deshret of the Delta. The two crowns would later be merged into one, the Sencha, the double crown of all Egypt. It began here, on this palette. The first image of a divine ruler wearing the symbols of two worlds. He is both man and God, both conqueror and guardian, both the hand that strikes and the hand that blesses. The artist who carved it likely worked within the temple walls. His tools were simple, stone chisels, copper blades, and his own sense of divine geometry. He followed rules that were already ancient, even then: proportion, symmetry, and a balance between action and stillness. His king must dominate the composition, yet remain serene. His enemies must fall, yet without chaos. His gods must witness, yet never intervene. And so he carved, slow, deliberate, guided by ritual precision. Each strike of the chisel was both artistic and devotional. Centuries later, when Egyptian scribes began writing the first hieroglyphic texts, they used many of the same symbols found on this stone: the falcon, the lotus, the scepter, the sandal-bearer. The Narmer Palette is in a sense the first written sentence of Egyptian civilization. To stand before it is to feel that gravity, not of stone but of meaning. The eyes of Narmer stare forward, calm and unreadable, his muscles tense but eternal, the lines around him crisp and deliberate, like a language spoken softly across time. It is a kind of perfection, the frozen dawn of history. Archaeologists found it buried within the temple precinct of Hierakonpolis, along with other votive offerings, mace heads, carved ivory, fragments of early sculpture. These were gifts to the gods, buried intentionally. Perhaps Narmer himself offered it, or perhaps it was placed there centuries later, as a relic of the kingdom's sacred beginnings. Even in its silence, the palette speaks. It speaks of a river that never stopped flowing, of fields that never ceased to bloom, of rulers who saw themselves not as men but as bridges between heaven and earth. It speaks of balance, ma'at, the Egyptian concept of order, justice, and truth. And it warns too that without balance the world would dissolve back into chaos. Thousands of years later, when later pharaohs built their own monuments, temples, pyramids, tombs, they followed the same pattern first expressed on this stone. The king at the center, the gods above, the enemies below, the universe, perfectly arranged. In this way, the Narmer Palette is not merely old, it is foundational. It is the blueprint for everything that came after. The art of eternity began here. Imagine for a moment the scene of its creation once more. The artist sitting cross-legged before the slab. The faint sound of chiseling echoing through the quiet courtyard. The faint smell of Nile clay and burning oil. He pauses often, gazing at the lines he's made. Perhaps he whispers a prayer to Horus, asking for guidance. He does not yet know that his work will outlive pyramids, that it will one day stand behind glass while millions gaze upon it in wonder. He only knows that he is shaping a story, the story of a king who became the first of his kind, and a land that became eternal. When the Nile floods each year, it carries with it silt from the farthest reaches of the land. That same silt, the color of the Narmer Palette, once covered the feet of its maker. The river remembers, the land remembers, and in its way, the stone does too. If you trace your hand, even just in the air, along the outline of the palette's carvings, the falcon, the intertwined beasts, the calm gaze of the king, you are tracing the very beginning of history's longest story, the dawn of pharaohs, the birth of Egypt. The ivory knife handle, the carved dawn of Egyptian ceremony. In the quiet desert air of ancient Egypt, before pyramids pierced the horizon, before kings were gods and stone spoke of eternity, there existed a humbler age, a time when beauty and power were still finding their language, when stories were not yet written in ink but whispered into ivory. Somewhere along the Nile, perhaps 5,500 years ago, a craftsman held a piece of elephant ivory in his hands, smooth, pale, and cool to the touch. The tusk had come from far away, traded along river routes from distant lands to the south. It was a precious thing, and this craftsman, unknown and unrecorded, would turn it into something that would outlast his village, his king, and his civilization. A knife handle, but not for hunting, not for war. A knife made for ceremony, a bridge between life and the sacred. The blade itself is long gone. What remains is the handle, carved with delicate, dreamlike images, each figure incised with such care that even after millennia, their outlines still whisper with meaning. It is called the ivory knife handle of Gebel el Arak, though some trace its origins back to Naqada I, a culture older than pharaohs, older than the written word. To hold it, even through glass, is to hold the pulse of a world before history. a world that still glimmered between myth and memory. The handle is small, only about 10 centimeters long, yet it carries entire worlds upon its surface. On one side, a tableau of order and chaos unfolds. Men and animals in motion, boats gliding on a wavy line of water, lions pouncing upon their prey. On the other, a figure, calm, still, symmetrical, stands between two rearing lions, grasping them by the necks. He is neither hunter nor victim. He is control made visible, a master of wildness, of nature, of balance. Later scholars would call him the master of animals, an image that would echo across Mesopotamia, Persia, and even Greece. But here, on this little handle, he may have first been born. Imagine the craftsman as he began to carve. He sits cross-legged in the dust, the smell of oil lamps and tanned hide drifting through the air. His tools are simple: flint, copper, perhaps a sharpened reed. The ivory's surface gleams faintly in the sunlight. He sketches lines, testing the balance of form and story. The lions curve their bodies gracefully toward him. The man stands tall, his arms stretching outward in power and peace. Each stroke is both precise and reverent. He is not merely decorating an object, he is invoking something. The knife will not be used to cut flesh or fiber, but to symbolically separate the mundane from the divine, to carve the boundaries between what is human and what is sacred. The Nile flows nearby, its waters heavy with silt. Fishermen call to one another from reed boats. Children laugh somewhere, chasing shadows in the sand, and the craftsman continues to work, breathing slowly, his movements deliberate, almost meditative. In this quiet rhythm, time begins to dissolve. 5,000 years later, the handle will still carry that same sense of calm, that same breath between worlds. When archaeologists uncovered it, they were stunned by its refinement. The figures carved upon it were not rough tribal markings, but precise compositions. They told stories of man's relationship with nature, of power, of ritual. It was art before art had rules. It was civilization whispering its first words. On one side, the river scene unfurls, small boats drifting across rippling lines that suggest water. Perhaps they are part of a procession. Perhaps they are spirits journeying toward the afterlife. Below, wild animals roam, lions and ibex, gazelles and ostriches, each rendered with startling grace. Their movement is fluid, but not chaotic. There is order here, hidden within the wildness. Above them all stands the human figure, strong, composed, timeless, his pose symmetrical, his face serene. To later Egyptian eyes, he might have been a proto-king, a being who brought harmony to the natural world, just as the future pharaohs would bring harmony to the land. But to his own people, he might have been something simpler, a story made flesh, a man who could calm beasts, a hunter so powerful that the animals bowed to him instead of fleeing. There is something profoundly human in that image, the longing to be at the center of creation, to hold balance between chaos and calm. It is a longing that would shape Egypt for centuries to come. The Nakata Afo culture, to which this handle likely belonged, lived in small farming communities along the Nile. Their lives were intimate, centered on crops, herds, and the rhythm of the flood. Yet their art reveals minds already reaching beyond survival. They carved boats, hunted gazelles, painted walls with ochre and charcoal. They buried their dead with care, placing ornaments and jars beside them, signs of belief in life beyond. The ivory handle belonged to that same imagination, one that saw meaning in every gesture, divinity in every motion. The ceremony for which the knife was made is lost to time. Perhaps it was used to ritually slaughter an animal before a feast. Perhaps it opened a symbolic gate between the living and the dead. Or perhaps it was never used at all, its purpose fulfilled simply by existing, a sacred object whose very presence completed the ritual. When you look closely at its carvings, you can almost feel the slow heartbeat of its creation, each tiny incision, each curve of ivory made by a human hand, guided by belief. There are no random lines here. Every mark belongs. It is a meditation captured in motion. As centuries passed, Egypt would grow, villages would rise into cities, chiefs into kings, symbols into hieroglyphs. The figures on the ivory handle would find new life on temple walls, tomb carvings and royal seals. The man between lions would evolve into Horus the falcon, protector of the king. The boat procession would become the solar bark of Ra, carrying the sun across the heavens. The language of the sacred was already here, waiting, sleeping, in ivory. The handle's journey from ivory tusk to ceremonial relic mirrors Egypt's own path, from nature to civilization, from hunter to ruler, from symbol to story. The craftsman who carved it could not have known that his small object would become a doorway into the beginning of Egyptian art itself, but perhaps, in some quiet way, he did feel it. Perhaps he understood that the images he carved were not his alone, but part of something greater, something that would continue long after he was gone. The ivory gleamed when it was new, soft and pale, with a faint luster in the morning sun. Over thousands of years, it darkened to honey and cream. The carved figures, once sharp and clear, softened with time. But even now, they seem alive. The lions still strain toward the central figure, the boats still glide, the world carved in miniature still moves in eternal silence. There is a quiet reverence in objects like this, small but impossibly significant. To look at it is to feel the first breath of Egyptian civilization, the moment art and ritual became one. It holds within it, not just a story, but a beginning, the moment when humanity realized that beauty could be a form of worship. Thousands of years later, when the first pharaohs rose and the pyramids touched the sky, they were following a path that began with simple carvings like these. The ivory handle is not a fragment of a lost age, it is the root of all that came after. In the Louvre Museum, where it rests today, the handle is displayed quietly among greater treasures, sarcophagi, sculptures, jewels. Yet many who pass it do not realize that this small carved piece of ivory holds a weight far greater than its size. It is the soul of a civilization caught in its first awakening. Stand before it, and you might feel something ancient stirring. Not awe, exactly, something quieter, the sense that you are standing where time began to breathe. Every civilization begins with a story, and this, carved into ivory before writing itself existed, is Egypt's first. Its lines still whisper the same truth. That order can be carved from chaos, that beauty can speak to the divine, and that even in silence the world remembers the hands that shaped it. The Abu Simbel temples, twin rock-cut sanctuaries in Egypt. Far to the south of modern-day Egypt, near the Sudanese border, the golden sands stretch endlessly, rising and falling like the waves of an ancient sea. The air hums with heat. The horizon ripples, and there, carved directly into a cliff of red sandstone, two colossal figures gaze toward eternity. Each sits with the serene power of a god, yet they are human, sculpted in the image of Pharaoh Ramses II. This is Abu Simbel, a monument to ambition, devotion, and divine kingship. The temples were not built merely as places of worship. They were proclamations, carved into the desert itself, of a pharaoh's everlasting might. Ramses II, who ruled more than 3,200 years ago, wished not only to honor the gods but to immortalize himself alongside them. What he created here, on the remote banks of the Nile, would stand as one of the most breathtaking feats of ancient engineering ever attempted. The first and largest temple at Abu Simbel was dedicated to Amun-Ra, Ra-Horakhti, and Ptah, the great gods of Thebes, Heliopolis, and Memphis. But its walls tell another story too, the story of Ramses himself. 4 immense seated statues dominate the facade, each about 20 meters tall. Their calm expressions look eastward, toward the rising sun, as though greeting it each morning with eternal patience. Between their feet, smaller carvings show his family, his wife Nefertari, his mother, his children, dwarfed by his own colossal form. When you stand at the base of those statues, you can feel the weight of the centuries pressing down. Every surface hums with detail, hieroglyphs carved deep into stone, scenes of conquest, offerings to gods, parades of priests and captives. Inside, the temple extends back into the mountain itself, through halls lined with pillars in the shape of Osirid figures. Ramses once again, depicted as Osiris, the god of the afterlife. The innermost sanctuary holds 4 seated statues, those of Amun-Ra, Ra-Horakhti, Ptah, and Ramses himself. Twice each year, on February 22 and October 22, the rising sun's light pierces the temple's entrance and travels through the chambers, illuminating the faces of the gods and of Ramses. Only Ptah, the god of darkness and creation, remains in shadow. For the ancient Egyptians, this was no coincidence, it was cosmic alignment, proof that the pharaoh's reign was blessed by the universe itself. Imagine the silence in that chamber, broken only by the first breath of sunlight sliding across cold stone, revealing the faces that had slept in darkness for months. Even now, thousands of years later, people gather to watch the same golden light return to those statues, as if time itself obeys the will of Ramses. Yet, as eternal as it seemed, Abu Simbel nearly vanished forever. In the mid-20th century, Egypt began a project of enormous ambition, the construction of the Aswan High Dam. This vast engineering effort promised to control the Nile's unpredictable floods, provide electricity, and support modern agriculture. But its creation would also drown entire regions beneath the waters of Lake Nasser. Among the doomed landmarks stood Abu Simbel. The temples that had survived for more than 3 millennia faced their final hour, not from war or weather, but from the calm rise of water. The world reacted with urgency. In 1960, UNESCO launched a campaign unlike anything attempted before, a global rescue mission to save Abu Simbel. Engineers, archaeologists, and laborers from more than 50 countries joined forces. The plan was both simple and staggering: to cut the temples into massive blocks, lift them and reassemble them on higher ground, about 65 meters above their original location. For years, under the blazing desert sun, workers cut through the living rock. They sliced the temples into over 1,000 carefully numbered pieces, each weighing up to 30 tons. Each fragment was catalogued, mapped, and moved. then painstakingly reconstructed on an artificial cliff built to mirror the original setting. The work demanded surgical precision. Even the angle of sunlight through the temple's doorway had to be recalculated so that the solar alignment continued exactly as before. It was, in every sense, a modern miracle. And in 1968, the temples reopened, reborn. The desert that had once echoed with chisels and shouts returned to silence. The Nile's waters rose, swallowing the valley below. But the twin sanctuaries of Abu Simbel remained, safe and steadfast, gazing over the new lake that had nearly consumed them. Today, visitors arrive by road, by boat, or even by air. They walk down the wide path that leads between artificial hills, and when the monumental facade comes into view, there is always a moment of stunned stillness. The same feeling must have struck travelers in ancient times. Those who approached by river, watching the giant figures emerge from the cliffs like gods, seated upon the earth itself. Inside, the air remains cool and dry. The carvings tell stories of battle and peace. The triumph at Kadesh, where Ramses claimed to have defeated the Hittites, though the truth was more of a draw. There are scenes of the pharaoh presenting offerings to Amun-Ra, and of his beloved queen Nefertari standing before Hathor. Every wall breathes reverence, order, devotion, a reminder that for the Egyptians stone was memory, and memory was eternity. A second, smaller temple stands nearby, dedicated to Hathor and Nefertari. This too was carved into the cliff, its facade adorned with 6 statues, 4 of Ramses and 2 of his queen, unusually equal in size. It is one of the rare monuments where a royal consort appears on such a scale beside her husband. Inside, the chambers are softer, the reliefs gentler. Nefertari is depicted playing music, offering flowers, and standing before the goddess Hathor, who was associated with love, beauty, and motherhood. The space feels more intimate, as though carved not only in stone but in affection. Together, these two temples, the grand and the graceful, embody the dual spirit of Egypt, power and devotion, eternity and tenderness. They speak not only of gods and kings but of the human longing to leave something behind that endures. When you stand there in the late afternoon, the light of the setting sun washes the facade in molten gold. The faces of Ramses and Nefertari seem to breathe again in the glow. The silence of the desert stretches infinitely outward, and the faint sound of wind passes between the colossi like a whisper from another age. You might imagine the workers who cut these stones in ancient times, the rhythmic strike of copper chisels, the scent of dust, the sweat drying on their skin. They worked not for fame but for faith, believing they were helping their pharaoh commune with the gods. And then centuries later, other workers, engineers, archaeologists, men and women from across the world came to the same desert, moved by the same devotion, not to a king but to history itself. Abu Simbel, in the end, became a temple twice built. Once by the ancients, in the name of gods, once by the moderns, in the name of memory. And that, perhaps, is its truest miracle. That even when faced with oblivion, humanity chose preservation over destruction, reverence over convenience. We moved mountains, literally, to ensure that the faces carved in stone would still greet the sunrise, long after our own names are forgotten. So the next time you see an image of Abu Simbel, its 4 silent guardians watching over the sands, remember that behind their stillness lies a story of immense movement, unity and devotion, a story where the hands of the ancient world reached out to the modern one, and both held fast against the flood. The temples still wait each dawn for the touch of sunlight, as they have for more than 3,000 years. And when that light arrives, gliding slowly across the statues' calm faces, it carries with it a message whispered across millennia, that beauty carved from belief can outlast even the river that gave birth to civilization. The Hagar Kim Temples. The island wakes beneath a slow sun, the sea murmurs against its ancient cliffs, and wind drifts softly across a barren plateau that has seen more dawns than any living memory could count. On this hill above the Mediterranean, the stones of Hagar Kim stand as if they are not just part of the earth, but guardians of time itself. No one knows who built them, nor precisely why, but they endure, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, carved by hands that shaped silence into meaning. It begins with a horizon, always. It begins with light. The air here tastes of salt and age, of limestone and eternity. The surface of the megaliths is rough to the touch, but worn smooth in places by centuries of wind and rain. Each block, some weighing more than 20 tons, was somehow moved from nearby quarries by people who had no metal, no wheels, and no beasts of burden strong enough to drag such weight. Yet the stones stand, perfectly aligned to the rising sun at the solstice, as if the builders understood the dance of heavens better than most who came after. If you stand before the great trilithon archway, you can feel the hush. It isn't just quiet, it's something deeper, an ancient kind of stillness, the kind that settles in the bones. Light filters through in golden streaks, painting the inner chambers in a shifting glow. When the sun reaches a certain point, Its beam slips through a narrow opening and strikes a stone altar inside, just as it has for 7,000 years. Hagar Kim was built, it is said, by the temple builders, a civilization lost before Egypt had its first kings. They left behind no written records, no known language, no carved name to remember them by. All they left were these temples, massive, rounded, and filled with echoes of worship. Archaeologists believe the site once held offerings of grain, bones, and carved figurines of fertility, full-bodied goddesses, their faces erased, their hips and bellies rounded in stone. To walk through these chambers is to step back into prehistory. The floor plan itself feels organic, flowing like a spiral rather than a grid. Doorways are low, making you bow your head as you pass, a gesture that feels almost like reverence, even if you didn't intend it. Each room seems to breathe. You move from one curved space to another, light shifting, sound muffled by stone, and somewhere in the quiet you begin to imagine the hum of voices, low chants, drums carved from wood and hide, feet pressing against the earth in rhythm with the wind. No one knows the name of their gods, but the goddess statues found here, and at nearby Manjodra, suggest a world centered on cycles, birth, harvest, death, and renewal. The people who built Hagar Kim lived close to the land. Their lives were short, but their sense of eternity vast. They tracked the movement of the sun and moon, watched stars rise and fall, and perhaps believed that to align stone with sky was to bring the divine closer to earth. The Maltese limestone breathes in the sun's warmth. It glows pale gold by day and silver under moonlight. At dusk, shadows gather between the standing stones like pools of forgotten memory. In the right moment, when the air is still, you might almost believe the site still hums, a resonance too low for modern ears to catch. It's said that the builders knew sound. Some chambers amplify a whisper, others swallow it entirely. The stones themselves may have been chosen for how they resonate, as much as for how they stand. In the museum nearby, small figurines rest behind glass, relics of those who prayed here. One, called the Sleeping Lady, was found in the hypogeum of Halsaflieni, not far away, carved in repose as though dreaming. Her body is soft, peaceful, human, yet she feels part of the same mystery as Hagar Kim. Perhaps she represents the same unseen presence that the temple once honored, life itself, in all its fleeting stillness. Imagine now, 7,000 years ago. The sea was closer, the climate warmer, the island greener. Families would climb the limestone hills at dawn, carrying offerings, baskets of grain, carved stones, vessels of oil. They would walk between upright slabs, glowing with early light. The elders would enter first, their bodies painted with ochre, their steps sure on the smooth stone. Inside, the air would be cool and quiet. A beam of sunlight might pierce through the opening, falling directly upon the altar. There, the offerings would be placed, not in sacrifice, but in gratitude. Outside, the younger ones would gather, listening to the low hum of chants from within. Birds would circle the cliffs, waves breaking below, and perhaps, just perhaps, they believed that the gods, or the earth itself, listened back. Thousands of years later, the temple fell silent. Winds buried it in dust, the stones weathered, moss grew where feet once tread. By the time the Phoenicians and later the Romans came to Malta, Hagar Kim was already ancient. They must have wondered, as we do now, who built such a thing and why. When 19th century explorers uncovered it, they found altars, figurines, and evidence of burnt offerings. The floor was packed with ash and small animal bones, but there was no script, no name, no myth that survived to explain the rituals, only architecture and silence. Even the name, Hagar Kim, is not from the builders themselves, but from the Maltese words meaning standing stones. Simple, poetic. The words fit, though they hide more than they reveal. As night falls on the site, the stones turn dark against the horizon. The stars rise in their slow procession. You can almost see how the builders might have looked up, tracing the same constellations that still burn above. And perhaps in their quiet way, they believed these temples were not built to last forever, only long enough to carry memory into the wind. The path from the temple leads down toward the sea. It winds through scrub and wild thyme, the air filled with the faint hum of insects. From here you can see the small island of Philfla in the distance, a dark shape against the silver water. It is said that even Philfla was sacred once, a place of offerings cast into the sea. If you linger at Hagar Kim long enough, you begin to sense how time folds here. The boundaries blur. You can almost feel the presence of the builders, not ghosts but echoes. They are still here, in the curvature of the walls, in the alignment of sunlight, in the weight of stone against sky. Some believe the temples were meant to mirror the body of the Earth Mother herself. From above, their outlines resemble a human form. Head, shoulders, hips. Each chamber corresponds to a part of the body, as though to enter was to return to the womb of the world. birth and death united in stone. Even erosion cannot erase intention. The limestone may crumble, but the geometry of devotion remains. These were not primitive minds, they were people who could think in generations, who could feel in centuries. And so, under the Maltese sun, Hagar Kim endures, a riddle made of silence, older than any written word, and as the wind brushes the stones again, you realize the labyrinth was never beneath the palace, nor within the earth. It was always here, in the winding corridors of time itself. The air grows cool as night folds itself around the stones. The last glimmers of daylight slip from the horizon, and in their place, the moon rises, pale, full, and watchful. It casts long, soft shadows across the limestone, turning the megalith silver. The stars shimmer faintly, as if they've been waiting all this time for someone to notice them again. The temple, in moonlight, feels alive. The wind passes through the doorways, breathing across the stone slabs like whispers through a flute. Every hollow and curve hums faintly, resonating with the low murmur of the sea far below. And if you stand very still, you can almost sense movement, not of the stones but of memory itself, flowing like water through the gaps of time. Perhaps it was always meant to be this way. Day belonged to the living, night to the sacred. Under the stars, this place becomes something else entirely. The stones do not merely stand, they listen. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the ancestors might have believed the world of the living and the spirit realm brushed against each other when the air was quiet and the sea calm. Perhaps the rituals performed within Hagar Kim were not meant to summon, but to remember, to remind both worlds that they were never truly separate. At the heart of the temple lies the central apse, the innermost chamber, where light barely reaches even at noon. By night, it's utterly dark. Here, archaeologists found altars of stone, decorated with spiral carvings and holes worn by offerings. One altar still bears traces of ash, blackened flecks clinging stubbornly after 7,000 years. They might be remnants of grain burned in thanks, or bone fragments from small animals offered to the earth. In this darkness, it's easy to imagine the soft glow of oil lamps flickering on ancient walls. The light would dance across the carvings, spirals, pits, lines, shapes that might not have been decoration at all, but a language of symbols now lost. A slow chant would begin, rising and falling like the sea, echoing softly through stone corridors. Those gathered might close their eyes, feeling the vibration of each sound reverberate through their chest. Sound was not just expression here, it was communion. Above, the constellations continue their quiet paths. The ancients knew these stars. They would have recognized Orion, or what would later be called Sirius, marking seasons, harvests, and ceremonies. Perhaps in the same way the temple's entrance frames the rising sun, one of its inner alignments might once have framed a star, now lost to the slow drift of heaven's axis. Each line of sight, each doorway, was intentional, a map not of land, but of the sky. Some archaeologists suggest that Hagar Kim may have served as a calendar, an observatory of light and shadow, but others feel that calling it merely a calendar misses the point. It was not a tool, it was a bridge between people and cosmos, stone and soul. In its architecture, you can sense something beyond practicality, a philosophy carved in rock. The people who built it understood that time was not a straight line. It curved, spiraled, returned upon itself, just like their temples. Each season, the same rituals repeated, each birth followed by death, each ending by renewal. The spiral motif, so common in Maltese temples, is not decoration, it is eternity. Even now, if you close your eyes and breathe with the rhythm of the sea, you can feel it, that looping pattern of existence. It has no beginning, no end, only the turning, the returning, and perhaps that is why Hagar Kim still stands, because it was never built to last. It was built to remember. When the dawn returns, the stones shift color once more, from silver to gold. The horizon brightens, and sunlight creeps slowly across the plateau. The same light that once struck the altar now touches your face. Thousands of years separate you from those first witnesses of dawn, and yet the moment feels unchanged. Nearby, another temple, Manadra, sits lower down the slope, aligned even more precisely with the solar calendar. At the equinox, the sun pierces directly through its entrance, illuminating the inner chamber in a beam of light. For a few brief minutes, darkness dissolves. It is easy to imagine priests or elders standing silently as this happened, their faces bathed in gold. For them, it wasn't physics or astronomy, it was rebirth. Hagar Kim and Manadra are sisters, two temples born of the same faith, carved by the same hands, facing the same sea. Together, they form one of the oldest religious complexes on Earth, older than the Egyptian pyramids, older than the stones of Stonehenge, and yet, far fewer people know their names. In modern Malta, visitors come and go. They take photographs, listen to guides, and leave, but sometimes, a few linger. They stand quietly in the inner apse, eyes closed, feeling the weight of the stones. Something hums there, just beneath hearing. It is not a sound, not quite a feeling, but a resonance that seems to come from the ground itself. Perhaps it is the echo of the builders. Perhaps it is only imagination. But even imagination is a form of memory. The builders, whoever they were, lived in small villages, scattered across the island. They fished, farmed barley and wheat, and shaped limestone with antler picks and stone hammers. Every block carved, every lintel placed, was done without wheels or beasts of burden. Only hands guided by purpose, not by blueprints. The limestone here is soft, easy to shape, but also to erode. And yet, despite millennia of storms, earthquakes, and invasions, Hagar Kim endures, as if the land itself protects it. In 1992, the site was covered with a canopy to shield it from the harsh Maltese sun and rain. Beneath that shelter, the ancient stones continue to age, but more slowly now, as if time has been asked to wait just a little longer. To walk through the temple today is to move between worlds, between the living and the long gone. Each curve of stone feels deliberate, each step like a page from a story too old for words. Even the air feels different here, heavier, quieter, almost sacred. There's a theory that the builders may have been descendants of seafarers who came to Malta from Sicily or the Aegean. If so, they must have carried more than tools. They carried beliefs and a sense that building in stone could make the invisible visible. That devotion, if shaped with enough patience, could outlast even death. It's a thought that humbles. That millennia ago, people without metal or writing managed to shape architecture that still defies explanation. We call them primitive, yet their monuments align perfectly with celestial events and acoustic principles. Perhaps the real question is not how they built these temples, but why we no longer build with such reverence. By midday, the sun climbs high overhead. The plateau grows warm. Cicadas sing in the brush, and the sea glitters below. The temple casts short, hard shadows. The world feels awake again, but the stones remain unmoved, patient as ever. The spiral of time turns once more. The builders are gone. The chants are silent. But Hagar Kim still breathes, quietly, endlessly, and as you stand within its curve of stone, you realize that it was never simply a temple. It was a mirror, a reflection of how ancient hands once touched eternity and left fingerprints in stone. Heart Scarab of Hatnefer. In the quiet folds of Thebes, where the sands stretch endlessly and the Nile whispers ancient secrets, there lies a relic whose presence has endured thousands of years. It is a heart scarab, a small but profound testament to the beliefs, hopes, and fears of a civilization whose shadows still linger in the monuments, tombs, and temple walls. The heart scarab of Hatnefer, discovered in the sepulchral quiet of a tomb at Sheikh Abdel Kurna, is not merely an artifact. It is a bridge between worlds, a silent keeper of stories long since passed into eternity. Its surface, polished and worn in some places, carries the careful traces of a hand guided by devotion and purpose. The eyes of the beetle carved with precision, the lines of hieroglyphs beneath its belly, etched with a ritualistic insistence that speaks of life, death, and the journey beyond. Hatnefer lived during the flourishing 18th dynasty, a time of prosperity, monumental architecture, and a profound connection to the divine. She was a woman of status, her existence entwined with the currents of power, ritual, and faith. Her tomb, simple yet elegant, was adorned with objects that would accompany her into the afterlife: canopic jars, funerary masks, golden chains, amulets, and the scarab that now bears her name. Among these treasures, the heart scarab held a sacred function, a purpose that transcended its physical form. It was carved from the greenish stone of serpentine, chosen not only for its durability, but for its symbolic resonance. The green color echoed life, regeneration, and fertility, mirroring the eternal rebirth that the Egyptians so deeply revered. The scarab, placed upon Hatnefer's chest, was more than decoration. It was a talisman of the soul. The underside of the beetle bore an inscription, a version of Chapter 30a of the Book of the Dead. This spell was a dialogue with the heart itself, a plea that it remain silent in the moment of judgment, that it not bear witness against its owner when weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and balance. In this ritual, the Egyptians believed, the heart was the measure of one's moral and spiritual weight. A heart unburdened by lies, deceit, or sin would grant passage to the eternal fields, the paradisiacal realm beyond mortal existence. Hatnefer, in commissioning and placing this scarab, ensured that her heart would be guided, protected, and in a sense coached through the weighty task of self-judgment. The meticulous artistry of the scarab reflects a world where even the smallest objects carried immense significance. Its back, rounded and polished, captures the play of light across the curves of the beetle's form. The hieroglyphs beneath, precise and deliberate, narrate not just a spell but an intimate conversation between the mortal and the divine. Every line, every stroke, every depth of the carving was performed with reverence. One can imagine the artisan, fingers steady, tools balanced in a careful rhythm, working in a quiet workshop while the Nile flowed in the distance, while the sun rose and fell over the limestone cliffs of Thebes. There was a knowledge here, a confluence of spirituality and craftsmanship that resonates even today, as we trace our fingers along photographs, reconstructions, and the very objects themselves. Beyond its function as a talisman, the heart scarab of Hatnefer also embodies the Egyptians' complex understanding of identity and memory. They believed that the heart was more than an organ, it was the essence of being, the repository of thoughts, intentions, and truth. In death, this belief translated into a tangible practice, safeguarding the heart through spells, amulets, and meticulous mummification processes. Each object, each placement, each inscription served as a guide for the soul, a map through an afterlife both feared and desired. Hatnefer's scarab, resting upon her chest, became a companion, a witness, a negotiator in the silent tribunal of eternity. Time has not dulled its presence. Even as centuries passed, sands shifted, tombs were looted, and dynasties rose and fell. The scarab remained, a constant bearer of history. Archaeologists, historians, and visitors alike have been captivated by its significance. In the hushed rooms of museums, the object seems to breathe with a quiet, dignified patience. It carries the weight of prayers, the careful devotion of a culture attuned to the cycles of life, death, and renewal. The green stone, the gold setting, the tiny yet commanding inscription, each element resonates with a subtle power, a whisper that invites contemplation and awe. The discovery of Hatnefer's tomb, and with it the scarab, opened windows into ancient funerary practices. The surrounding artifacts tell the story of her life, her status, and the elaborate care given to those of high standing. Canopic jars, used to protect the organs of the deceased, stand alongside statuettes and amulets designed to invoke protection, fertility, and guidance. Each item is a reflection of a belief system where death is not an end, but a transition, a journey guided by ritual, magic, and moral accountability. Among these treasures, the scarab stands out not only for its artistry but for its intimacy. It was meant to lie closest to the very heart of the deceased, to interact directly with the spiritual essence within. It is in this intimacy that the scarab's power is most felt. Scholars have long debated the nuances of the inscriptions, the exact phrasing, the intended magical effects. Yet beyond academic interpretation, there is a human resonance, the same fear, hope, and desire for continuity that Hatnefer must have felt. The scarab becomes a lens through which we can glimpse the anxieties and aspirations of an individual, frozen in time, yet alive in meaning. Its presence reminds us that history is not solely built on kings and wars, but also on the silent, careful devotion of individuals and the objects they leave behind. As we follow the journey of this small object from workshop to tomb, from Thebes to the Metropolitan Museum of Art where it now rests, we trace not only the movement of matter but of culture, belief, and memory. Each crack in the stone, each patina on the gold, each line of hieroglyphs carries with it the echoes of hands that shaped it, prayers that animated it, and centuries that preserved it. In the quiet of a museum gallery, one can almost hear the faint whisper of 1,000 Nile winds, the rustle of linen wrappings, the soft footfalls of priests and family members attending the final rites. The scarab, in its serene yet commanding presence, bridges the gap between then and now, between the sacred and the tangible. The narrative of the heart scarab extends beyond its physical form. It is entwined with the mythologies of Egypt, the concept of Ma'at, and the cyclical nature of time as the Egyptians understood it. The daily journey of the sun, the flooding of the Nile, the seasonal rhythms, all were reflected in the spiritual practices surrounding death. By safeguarding the heart, by invoking the spell of Chapter 30a, Hatnefer was not only seeking protection for herself, but participating in a cosmic order, aligning her soul with the eternal rhythms of the universe. The scarab thus serves as both a personal artifact and a microcosm of broader religious thought, an intersection of personal devotion and universal principle. Through centuries of scholarship, the heart scarab of Hatnefer has inspired studies in material culture, iconography, and ancient Egyptian religion. Each new examination, whether through high-resolution photography, CT scanning of accompanying mummies, or detailed translation of hieroglyphs, adds layers of understanding. Yet despite these analyses, there remains a quiet mystery. The intimacy of the spell, the exact phrasing, the emotional resonance that Hatnefer must have imbued into this small object. These are details that evade pure documentation. They dwell instead in the imagination, the space between history and human empathy. It is in this space that the scarab speaks to us today, across millennia, not merely as an artifact, not merely as a subject of study, but as a vessel of human hope, fear, devotion, and the eternal quest for life beyond death. As you picture the quiet tombs of Thebes, the careful hands carving the stone, the devoted placement of the amulet over the heart, the narrative unfolds like a gentle river, winding through time, carrying stories of faith, mortality, and cosmic harmony. The scarab is a small object, yet it bears the weight of worlds, the intimate world of Hatnefer, the ceremonial world of the Egyptian elite, and the boundless world of the afterlife she sought to enter. And so, in the silent chambers of the past, where the Nile's whisper mingles with the wind across the desert sands, the heart scarab of Hatnefer continues its eternal vigil. It is a relic that is at once personal and universal, small yet monumental, intimate yet timeless. In every curve, every inscription, every glint of gold and green, it tells a story that spans human history, belief, and the inexorable journey toward eternity. It is more than a heart scarab. It is a symbol, a guide, and a whisper from the past that continues to carry its weight, its meaning, and its quiet majesty into the present. As the golden sun dipped behind the horizon over Thebes, the tombs of the nobles and royals lay bathed in shadow, each stone echoing stories untold, secrets whispered through the ages. The heart scarab of Hatnefer, resting silently on her chest, was more than just a protector of her soul. It was a witness to the intricate interplay between life, death, and eternity. A small object whose presence spoke volumes about the culture that birthed it. Beyond its physicality, the scarab is a symbol of cosmic order, of Ma'at, the principle of truth and balance that governed every aspect of Egyptian thought. Within the smooth curves of its carved body lay centuries of spiritual and ritual knowledge, a delicate balance between artistry and devotion, a convergence of material and immaterial worlds. The rituals surrounding death in ancient Egypt were meticulously designed, each step deliberate, each item imbued with meaning. The placement of the scarab over the heart was not incidental. It was a deliberate act ensuring that the essence of Hatnefer would be judged favorably in the Hall of Two Truths, the sacred space where her soul would encounter Osiris, Lord of the Underworld. This chamber, envisioned in sacred texts and etched into funerary art, was where the scales of Ma'at weighed her heart against the feather of truth. The scarab acted as both shield and advocate, an intercessor that would silence the heart if it trembled with fear or guilt, allowing the spirit to pass into the eternal fields unburdened. Imagine the artisans who shaped the scarab, their hands steady, their minds attuned to the spiritual significance of each line and curve. They worked in workshops illuminated by the soft glow of oil lamps with the distant sound of the Nile flowing outside. Every detail mattered. The beetle's back, polished smooth, reflects not only the sun but the reverence with which it was created. The underside, inscribed with the Chapter 30a spell, is a map of morality and cosmic law, a guide for the heart navigating the thresholds between mortality and the divine. The Egyptians understood that death was a continuation of life in another form, and the scarab was a vessel to guide that transition, a spiritual compass embedded in stone and gold. The symbolism of the scarab beetle itself is profound. Known for its behavior of rolling dung balls, the Egyptians saw in it a metaphor for the sun's journey across the sky. Khepri, the solar deity, was often depicted as a scarab, pushing the sun along its daily path, embodying creation, rebirth, and eternal cycles. By placing this emblem over Hatnefer's heart, the priests and family invoked not only protection but the assurance of renewal. Each heartbeat, each pulse, was imagined as a miniature cosmos, moving in harmony with the eternal cycles of the universe. The scarab connected the human microcosm to the celestial macrocosm, a link between the physical body and the vast rhythms of time and nature. The tomb of Hatnefer itself offers further context for understanding the scarab's significance. Nestled among other tombs in the Valley of the Nobles, her resting place was rich with symbolism. Canopic jars, crafted with equal care, stood in silent vigilance over the vital organs, each lid bearing the likeness of a protective deity. Amulets in gold and faience adorned her body, each one a charm against evil, illness, or disruption in the journey to the afterlife. The scarab was both central and intimate, lying directly over the heart, connecting her corporeal existence with the spiritual trials to come. The arrangement of these artifacts reflects a society deeply invested in ensuring that the soul, upon departing the earthly realm, would remain intact, whole, and capable of eternal life. Centuries later, as archaeologists unearthed Hatnefer's tomb, they were greeted not only by objects of material value, but by the invisible threads of belief and devotion woven through them. The heart scarab, though small, revealed the sophistication of Egyptian funerary practices and the depth of personal spirituality. Scholars pore over its inscriptions, translating the hieroglyphs, analyzing the nuances of the spell, and exploring the cultural framework from which it emerged. Yet even with all this study, there remains a subtle mystery. The emotional resonance, the intimate intent of those who created and placed it, escapes complete comprehension, leaving room for awe and imagination. The scarab also tells a story of continuity and adaptation. Over the millennia, the symbol of the scarab persisted in Egyptian art, iconography, and amuletic culture. From modest personal charms to large ceremonial pieces, the scarab maintained its association with protection, rebirth, and cosmic order. Hatnefer's heart scarab, therefore, is both an individual artifact and a chapter in a long cultural narrative, linking her personal journey with broader religious, social, and artistic traditions. Its survival allows us to connect, not just with one life, but with the enduring worldview of a civilization that revered both the seen and the unseen. The artistry itself invites meditation. The smooth contours of the beetle, the depth of the inscriptions, and the subtle variations in color and texture all contribute to a sense of quiet grandeur. When viewed closely, the scarab seems alive, its form echoing the rhythms of life it was meant to safeguard. One can almost sense the pulse of the heart it once covered, the ritualized breath of Hatnefer, the gentle weight of expectation carried into the tomb. The object becomes a conduit for imagination, a bridge across time, allowing the modern observer to experience, in a contemplative sense, the spiritual universe of ancient Egypt. Beyond personal protection, the heart scarab also functions as a key to understanding broader Egyptian cosmology. The Book of the Dead, from which Chapter 30a originates, outlines a comprehensive vision of the afterlife, including the journey of the soul, the trials it faces, and the moral imperatives it must uphold. The scarab is a tangible interface with this spiritual system, a device through which the soul is both guided and shielded. It reminds us that the Egyptians approached death not as a cessation, but as a transformation, a passage governed by law, ritual, and ethical alignment. In this context, Hatnefer's scarab becomes more than a funerary object. It is a lesson in philosophy, morality, and the intricate dance between human action and cosmic order. The continued fascination with the heart scarab of Hatnefer also stems from its survival against time, nature, and human interference. It has witnessed centuries of environmental change, political upheaval, and the curiosity of countless visitors. Its preservation allows a direct sensory connection to the past, enabling us to appreciate not just the technical skill of its creators, but the profound human concerns it embodies: the fear of judgment, the hope for continuation, and the desire to align with something greater than oneself. Its beauty and function converge seamlessly, demonstrating that in ancient Egypt, artistry and spirituality were inseparable, each amplifying the other in quiet harmony. As scholars examine the scarab today, they consider the material composition, the stylistic elements, and the ritualistic context. Advanced imaging reveals minute tool marks, the orientation of hieroglyphs, and the possible pigments once applied to enhance its symbolic power. Each observation contributes to a richer understanding of Egyptian belief systems and their approach to mortality. Yet despite the exhaustive study, the scarab retains an aura of mystery. Its inscriptions are not merely words, they are incantations, expressions of hope, and silent prayers. They resonate beyond language, transcending centuries to communicate a message of care, protection, and eternal vigilance. In reflecting upon Hatnefer's scarab, one realizes that it represents more than death rites. It is a window into the soul of a culture. Every facet, from its carved form to its placed intention, reflects the values, fears, and aspirations of a civilization deeply attuned to the rhythms of nature, the cycles of life, and the promise of what lies beyond. It stands as a reminder that even small objects can carry immense significance, that intimacy and scale are not mutually exclusive, and that the human desire for continuity and recognition in the universe is as timeless as the stones of Thebes themselves. Through this artifact, we encounter the convergence of art, religion, and philosophy. The scarab is a nexus, a point where personal devotion meets cosmic order. It illustrates that even in the simplest of forms, profound ideas can reside. Hatnefer, through this small green stone, communicated her trust, her hope, and her belief in the principles of Mahat. Her choices, her faith, and her artistry live on in the scarab, a silent, yet eloquent testament to a world that continues to inspire awe and contemplation. It reminds us that history is alive, not just in texts and temples, but in the smallest objects, the personal items that once rested against a beating heart, carrying with them the weight of eternity. Even now, the heart scarab of Hatnefer continues to teach, inspire, and evoke wonder. It is a quiet guide through the mysteries of human belief, a bridge between the ancient and the present. In museums, in scholarly studies, and in the contemplative minds of those who encounter it, the scarab breathes with a silent life. Its green stone glows under the gallery lights, reflecting centuries of faith and care. It connects us with the rhythms of ancient Thebes, the devotion of artisans and priests, and the personal hopes of a woman seeking eternal peace. It is, above all else, a reminder that even in death, the human spirit seeks continuity, recognition, and alignment with the eternal order of the universe. In tracing the journey of Hatnefer's scarab, from its creation in a workshop along the Nile, to its place on her chest, through the tomb's discovery and its eventual study, we see a narrative that is both intimate and vast. The scarab embodies a civilization's approach to mortality, its artistry, and its spirituality. It is a touchstone for understanding the universal human concern with life, death, and what may lie beyond. And so, in the quiet reverence that surrounds it, the heart scarab of Hatnefer remains a timeless guide, a witness to faith, and an eternal companion to a journey that transcends millennia. Statue of Pharaoh Hor. The desert air of Saqqara, warm and dry, carries the whispers of an ancient civilization that rose along the Nile thousands of years ago. Amid the endless sands, the tombs and temples of Egypt hold stories not just in their grandiose structures, but in the smallest of objects, artifacts that speak of power, faith, and eternity. One such artifact is the statue of Pharaoh Hor, a sculpture that stands silently, capturing both the visage and the spirit of a ruler from a time when kings were considered divine intermediaries between the people and the gods. The statue was not merely a likeness, it was a vessel, a resting place for the the life force or vital essence, ensuring the pharaoh's eternal presence even after his mortal body had returned to the dust. The moment Pharaoh Hor was laid to rest, the artisans worked with meticulous care, fashioning his statue from stone that would endure centuries. Smooth lines traced the contours of his face, sharp and serene, expressing authority, wisdom, and tranquility. His eyes, carved with precision, were not merely ornamental, they were portals, designed to gaze into eternity, to connect with the gods, to witness the rituals performed in his honor. The body, rigid yet lifelike, embodied the ideals of kingship, a silent assertion of stability, permanence, and divine order. It was an object both practical and spiritual, intended to house the pharaoh's while projecting his power across time. The Egyptian understanding of the was complex, woven into every aspect of life, death, and the afterlife. While the body decayed, the needed a home, a place to inhabit, to observe the living world, and to receive offerings from the descendants and priests. Pharaoh Hor's statue, therefore, was central to these beliefs. A bridge between the temporal and the eternal. Crafted from a durable material, it was built to withstand time and human neglect, a testament to the Egyptians' foresight and reverence for life's unseen forces. Every chisel mark, every polish, was an act of devotion, a prayer carved into stone. As one approaches the statue today, there is a palpable sense of presence, an almost imperceptible hum of energy that seems to radiate from the stone. The shoulders are broad, the hands firmly positioned, palms facing the body in a gesture of composure and control. Hieroglyphs etched with precision along the sides recount the pharaoh's titles, his lineage, and his relationship with the gods. These inscriptions, though silent, speak of a society that saw writing as more than communication. It was magic, a conduit between the living, the dead, and the divine. Through these words, Pharaoh Hor continues to speak, each symbol a testament to his enduring essence. The statue also offers insight into the artistry of the period. Egyptian sculptors of the era were bound by strict conventions, yet within these boundaries they achieved remarkable expression. The proportions are calculated to convey dignity, balance, and poise. The posture is formal yet commanding, a visual representation of the pharaoh's eternal vigilance. The materials themselves were chosen not only for durability but for their symbolic resonance. Stones of varying color, texture, and hardness were employed to enhance the statue's spiritual efficacy, each nuance reinforcing the sacred purpose it served. In this way, the statue transcends mere representation. It becomes an artifact of profound cultural, religious, and aesthetic significance. Beyond the technical mastery, the statue of Pharaoh Hor embodies the human desire for continuity and remembrance. Ancient Egyptians believed that as long as the was properly cared for, the deceased would continue to partake in offerings and rituals, maintaining a presence in the world of the living. This principle drove the construction of statues, tombs, and temples, ensuring that Pharaoh Hor would remain eternally observed, honored, and protected. The statue, in essence, is a covenant between generations, a promise that the pharaoh's spirit would never fade, that his legacy would endure alongside the monuments that bore his name. In contemplating the statue, one can imagine the rituals performed around it, the priests bearing incense and offerings, the chants and invocations filling the air with sacred resonance. Every gesture, every object placed before the statue, was part of a carefully orchestrated system designed to sustain Pharaoh Hor's The statue did not merely occupy space, it interacted with it, serving as a focal point for the living to communicate with the eternal. Its presence transformed the tomb from a mere burial site into a sacred space, alive with spiritual significance, a microcosm of Egyptian cosmology and devotion. The statue also reflects the political dimension of kingship. By immortalizing Pharaoh Hor in stone, the artisans reinforced the social and divine order, projecting his authority beyond the confines of life. Subjects and neighboring states could witness the enduring symbol of his power, a reminder that kingship, once divinely sanctioned, transcended mortality. Every curve of the statue, every inscription, was calculated to convey not just reverence but legitimacy, to solidify the pharaoh's place in the eternal hierarchy of gods and rulers. The stone, cold and silent, becomes eloquent, narrating a story of power, piety, and permanence that resonates across millennia. Even as time passes, the statue continues to captivate those who encounter it. Archaeologists, historians, and visitors alike are drawn to its presence, finding in its carved features a window into the soul of ancient Egypt. The smooth stone, the measured posture, and the carefully inscribed hieroglyphs invite contemplation, encouraging a deeper understanding of a civilization that intertwined life, death, and the cosmos. The statue stands as both a relic and a living testament, a reminder of the enduring human desire to bridge the ephemeral and the eternal, to leave behind a mark that transcends time itself. The story of the K statue is also a story of discovery. Buried for centuries beneath layers of sand and stone, it has survived the ebb and flow of empires, the plundering of tombs, and the relentless passage of time. When uncovered, the statue revealed not only the technical skill of its creators, but the spiritual and social complexities of the early dynastic period. Scholars have studied its proportions, its inscriptions, and its placement within the tomb, uncovering clues about the rituals, beliefs, and daily life of Pharaoh Hor's era. Yet, despite all the analysis, there remains a sense of mystery, a feeling that the statue contains knowledge and presence that cannot be fully captured, that it continues to guard secrets meant only for the eyes of the divine. As one lingers in front of the Ka statue today, it is impossible not to sense the profound intersection of art, faith, and human aspiration it embodies. The pharaoh's gaze, though immortalized in stone, seems to follow the observer, inviting reflection on mortality, purpose, and continuity. The statue transforms from a mere artifact into a portal, a conduit for imagination and contemplation, linking the present with a civilization that mastered the art of preserving not just bodies, but souls. In its stillness, it speaks with quiet authority, reminding us that true immortality lies not only in monuments and inscriptions, but in the enduring power of belief, artistry, and devotion. The Ka statue, standing quietly in the dim recesses of Pharaoh Hor's tomb, is more than stone. It is a repository of the king's essence, a sentinel watching over the passage of time. Every curve of its form, every line etched into its surface, carries the weight of ritual, history, and divine intention. When the artisans first carved the statue, they did so with the knowledge that it would serve a function far beyond mere representation. The Ka, the life force of the pharaoh, was believed to inhabit the statue, allowing Pharaoh Hor to participate in offerings, prayers, and the continued rhythm of life, even after his mortal body had returned to dust. In this way, the statue is both a work of art and a vessel of eternal consciousness, bridging the mortal and the immortal. As the centuries passed, the Ka statue bore silent witness to the changing fortunes of Egypt. Dynasties rose and fell, empires expanded and collapsed, yet the statue endured, a testament to the skill and foresight of its creators. The stone, carefully chosen for durability, resisted erosion, and the inscriptions along its sides retained the sharp clarity of the hieroglyphs, each character a spell, a declaration, a prayer. These symbols do not merely describe Pharaoh Hor's life, they invoke his presence, reaffirm his divine mandate, and connect the living with the deceased. Scholars who study the statue marvel at the depth of knowledge embedded in its design, recognizing that it was conceived not only as a memorial, but as a functioning participant in the sacred cycle of Egyptian religious practice. The placement of the Ka statue within the tomb was deliberate and profound. Positioned to face the rising sun, it aligned with celestial patterns that mirrored the Egyptians' cosmic understanding. Each morning, as the sun's first rays penetrated the tomb, they would illuminate the statue, casting shadows that seemed almost alive, as if the pharaoh himself observed the world. This connection to the heavens reinforced Pharaoh Hor's divine status, reminding all who entered that the king was both human and god, temporal and eternal. The ritualistic orientation of the statue was not merely symbolic, it was an operational part of Egyptian theology, ensuring that the Ka could interact with the cycles of nature and the prayers of the living. The texture and color of the Ka statue also tell a story. Polished surfaces reflect light in specific ways, highlighting the contours of the face and the folded hands. Stone pigments and inlays, carefully selected, would have added vibrancy, accentuating the features that mattered most in the spiritual and symbolic framework. In ancient times, the eyes may have been inlaid with quartz or precious stone, giving them a lifelike glint, reinforcing the statue's role as a living vessel for the Ka. The pharaoh's posture, formal and upright, conveys authority and serenity, while the scale of the statue ensures that it dominates the space, a constant presence that commands attention, respect, and devotion. In examining the Ka statue, one must also consider the social and political context in which it was created. Pharaoh Hor ruled during a period when kingship was both absolute and sacred, a system where the well-being of the state was directly tied to the favor of the gods. By immortalizing the pharaoh in stone, the artisans and priests reinforced the social hierarchy, projecting the king's power beyond his physical life. The Ka statue became a symbol not only of the individual ruler, but of the enduring authority of the institution of kingship itself. Citizens and officials could see in its serene gaze the stability and permanence of divine governance, a reminder that Pharaoh Hor's rule continued even beyond death. As centuries turned into millennia, the Ka statue became an artifact of fascination for modern scholars, historians, and travelers. Excavated carefully, it revealed secrets about early dynastic Egyptian beliefs, burial practices, and artistic conventions. Archaeologists noted the precision of the carving, the mathematical proportions used, and the thoughtful placement within the tomb. Every aspect of the statue was a lesson in the Egyptians' understanding of the human form, divine symbolism, and the interplay between art and ritual. Even today, standing before the Ka statue, one can sense the invisible currents of intention that infused its creation, as if the artisan's prayers and the pharaoh's essence still linger in the air around it. The Ka statue also inspires reflection on the universality of human desire for immortality. Across cultures and centuries, humans have sought ways to transcend death, to leave a legacy that endures. In Pharaoh Hor's Ka statue, we see one of the earliest and most sophisticated expressions of this longing. The Egyptians' intricate understanding of the spiritual self, their integration of art, ritual, and astronomy, demonstrates a civilization profoundly aware of the fragility of life and the potential for transcendence. The statue, silent and immovable, embodies the hope that through careful preparation, the essence of a person can persist, observed and honored by generations yet unborn. The rituals surrounding the Ka statue would have been elaborate. Priests would enter the tomb with offerings of food, incense, and recitations of sacred texts. Each gesture was performed with the understanding that the Ka was present, that Pharaoh Hor could perceive and benefit from these actions. In this sense, the statue was an active participant in a living tradition of devotion. It was not merely a passive object. It required care, attention, and engagement from the living, ensuring that the pharaoh's essence remained nourished and vigilant. These practices highlight the intimate connection between the physical representation and the spiritual life force it housed. Even now, as the Ka statue rests in a museum or archaeological site, it retains an aura of sacredness. Visitors cannot help but feel a sense of reverence, an awareness of the millions of lives and years that have passed while the statue remains steadfast. It is a reminder that objects can carry memory, belief, and energy across time, preserving the intentions and spirits of those long gone. The Ka statue of Pharaoh Hor, with its enduring gaze and perfect form, serves as both a historical artifact and a spiritual testament, bridging the ancient and the modern, the mortal and the eternal. Through its silent presence, the Ka statue continues to educate and inspire. It tells of a civilization that valued balance, order, and the integration of the earthly and the divine. It reminds us that art was not merely aesthetic but functional, serving both religious and political purposes. The story carved into stone is one of care, devotion, and foresight, an invitation to understand a world that existed thousands of years ago, yet still speaks to our deepest human questions about life, death, and the legacy we leave behind. The Ka statue of Pharaoh Hor stands today as a symbol of endurance, a connection to the sacred, and a celebration of human creativity and devotion. It embodies the Egyptians' remarkable capacity to conceive of life beyond death, to honor rulers, and to integrate belief, art, and function in a single enduring object. Every line, every shadow, every inscription continues to resonate, a whisper across millennia, reminding us that even in stone, the essence of a life well lived can continue to move, watch, and influence the world. In its presence we sense the weight of history, the continuity of belief, and the eternal vigilance of a pharaoh whose Kai remains immortal. Thank you for joining us on this journey through ancient Egypt's most remarkable artifacts. Each piece carries stories, secrets, and whispers from thousands of years ago. If you enjoyed this exploration, please like and subscribe to our channel for more mysteries unearthed from history. Share where you're watching from and the time there. We love hearing from our global audience.